Um, when you think of fish in the Bible, what comes to mind? You might think about Jonah being swallowed by the great fish, or you might think about the feeding of the 5,000 with a little bit of bread and a little bit of fish. When you think of lions in the Bible, what comes to mind? I always think of the Lion of Judah, which refers to Jesus Christ. And I think about Daniel and the lion's den. When you think of donkeys in the Bible, what comes to mind? Well, you think about Jesus riding into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. Or you might think, like my daughter does, about the donkey that spoke to Balaam. Pretty amazing things. When you think of camels in the Bible, what comes to mind? Some people have some ideas out there. We know in the Gospels, Jesus uses the camel a couple times. He talks about how hard it is to get into the kingdom. And he compares a rich man to putting a camel through an eye of a needle. And some may not be as familiar with this one, but he also rebukes the Pharisees and talks about they strain a gnat and swallow a camel. That's what most people think of if they think of anything about camels in the Bible. Camels don't have an honorable mention in the Bible. Not too honorable, anyway. Camels are mentioned 61 times in the Bible. That's less than one time per book of the Bible, because there are 66 books. And in the New Testament, they're only mentioned 6 times, all in the Gospels. A lot of times when you think of camels, and you may have thought of this when I said this, you think of the nativity scene, right? You think of the Magi coming and visiting the baby, and they were bringing all their gifts on camels. And they may have brought them on camels, but the word camel isn't in there. They don't even get mentioned. And in fact, when they're mentioned in the Gospels, I told you about the eye of a needle and swallow a camel. And the only other time they're mentioned is they talk about the fashions of John the Baptist. He wore camel's hair. They aren't in any part of a poetic or romantic or wisdom section of the Bible. You don't see them in Psalms. You don't see them in Proverbs. They're definitely not in Song of Solomon. They are mentioned in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but they're part of the unclean animals. You know, the story that Stacy told in Luke of the demons being cast out could have been camels as well as pigs. So they don't have a lot of honor. But it's interesting because they are mentioned a lot, and usually when you hear about camels in the Bible, they're talking about maybe wealth and power. You hear about Job, and Job has like 3,000 camels at the beginning of the story, and he has 6,000 at the end of the story. And you can compare that to what Ezra and Nehemiah say about camels when they come back from captivity. They only had 430 for the whole group that was coming back, compared to Job having 3,000 just in his household. They're also talked about a lot for transport. There are all kinds of things that are mentioned that are on their backs: food and gold and spices and people. But interestingly enough, Genesis chapter 24 has the word camels 17 times. This is the story of their big moment in the light. Okay? So if you want to turn to Genesis 24, I'm going to be reading through it and talking about it. Just know that you'll hear the word camel a lot. We won't read every verse because partway through the story it repeats itself. But I'm going to tell you about a person who was a faithful person, full of faith, looking for the right person. Here's Genesis chapter 24, verses 1 through 8. Now Abraham was old, advanced in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in every way. And Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he owned, Please place your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I live. But you shall go to my country and to my relatives and take a wife for my son Isaac. And the servant said to him, Suppose the woman will not be willing to follow me to this land. Should I take your son back to the land from where you came? I think he thinks that's a selling point, to be able to see Isaac. Then Abraham said to him, Beware lest you take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my birth, and who spoke to me, and who swore to me, saying, To your descendants I will give this land, he will send his angel before you, and you will take a wife for my son there. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from my oath, from this oath, only do not take my son back there. So it starts off with Abraham. We don't hear about Abraham anymore in this story. He starts at the beginning. He gets things rolling. He gets a promise and a mission for his servant. And he's got some conditions to it. He doesn't want it to be a Canaanite woman. He wants it to come from his relatives. He wants him to go to where his relatives are, which is not close by, and find a wife there. And he's not to take Isaac with him, which I would think that trying to decide whether you're going to marry somebody, you'd like to see who they are. But Abraham says no. So he has him make a promise to carry out this particular mission with some conditions. And I just want to point out that we also have a mission, a commission. We get it from Matthew. The end of Matthew talks about going into the world and making disciples, or to preach the word. And we also have some conditions. Those conditions include the fact that we're supposed to love God with all our heart, to love our neighbor, and to love one another. Get a pattern there, loving all those things. So the condition in us carrying out our mission of preaching the gospel and making disciples is to show love while we do it. And the last thing I want to add to that is that we also know that God is the one that works to change people's hearts. So when we get sent off on this mission, we don't have to actually make the disciples. God's going to help us by changing people's hearts as we preach to them and let them know the gospel. Amen. Okay? I was told by someone before I got up here that if I was short on my sermon, that no one would complain. Do you all promise? Okay. I got an amen. That's good. Genesis 24, 9 through 11. So the servant placed his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his master, and swore to him concerning the matter. Then the servant took 10 camels from the camels of his master and set out with a variety of good things of his master's in his hand, and he arose and went to Mesopotamia to the city of Nahor. And he made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of water at evening time, the time when women go out to draw water. Okay, that's kind of a short little section, but I just want to point out that this servant is being faithful to Abraham and the promise that he made. He's gone the distance. That is 450 miles that he had to travel, which would have taken him about 15 to 18 days to get there. And for us, our trip is a lifetime to carry out our mission. Correct? Okay. Genesis 24, 12 through 14. And he said, O Lord, the God of my master, Abraham, please grant me success today and show loving kindness to my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Now, may it be that the girl to whom I say, Please let down your jar so that I may drink, and who answers, Drink, and I will water your camels also. May she be the one whom thou hast appointed for thy servant Isaac. And by this I shall know that thou hast shown loving kindness to my master. Now, we get lots of examples of living from the Old Testament. I'm not sure this is a real specific prayer. And I'm not sure that every time we pray something like this that you're going to get the answer that you hope. But I want to point out that this servant was not only being faithful to the task and mission he was given and the promise he made, but he was full of faith. He trusted what Abraham said about God going before him and that God would help him find the wife, enough that when he got there, he talked to God and made a prayer. He prayed for his success and that God would show loving kindness to Abraham. And then he specifically prayed about, and here's the code, God. This is what I want you to do, and this is what I want to see, and this will let me know. Kind of dangerous. So, verses 15 to 27. And it came about before he had finished speaking, that behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor, came out with her jar on her shoulder. And the girl was very beautiful, a virgin, and no man had relations with her. And she went down to the spring and filled her jar and came up. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, "Please let me drink a little water from your jar." Not a big deal, but Rebekah is a kind person. And she said, "Drink, my lord." And she quickly lowered her jar to her hand and gave him a drink. Now, when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, "I will draw also for your camels until they have finished drinking." There are 10 camels, and 10 camels can, they can drink about 30 gallons on average when they're sitting. I've actually seen it range from 20 to 53. They can do 53 gallons in 3 minutes. And you kind of wonder where it all goes. Everybody used to kind of think that that big hump on their back is where it went. That's not where it goes. They actually have red blood cells that are more elastic than ours, and that's where they store it. And then they use it slowly. That's why they can go for a long time without drinking. So to do 30 gallons for 10 camels, and maybe Rebekah carried about 5 gallons in her thing, that would be 60 trips between the well and the trough. I was thinking, well, he sat him down, and I was thinking that that's a pretty big commitment to make, to say, let me water your camels. That's a lot. It tells you a lot about her because, first of all, she's a strong person, obviously, to be able to do that much work. She's a hardworking person, and she was kind to even just give him some water out of her jar. She was doing the work for the family, and she's stopping to do this. And I don't know how much time it took her to do all that, but I bet somebody at home was wondering, where is she with the water? And but the important about this is that God was showing the servant that this was the right person. She responded and to the request, just as he prayed it. She was also unmarried, and she was from Abraham's family. So she was the right person. Immediately, the servant acknowledges that God was giving him success. When we go out to do our mission, to spread the gospel, to make disciples, not everybody is going to respond. And that's because God's working in their hearts to do that. But when they do, we should be rejoicing that we're having success. And we should be recognizing that that success is coming from God and not from us. Okay? Genesis 24, 28 to 33. Oh, you know what? I skipped a part here. I need to finish the part I was going to read. So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran back to the well to draw, and she drew for all his camels. Meanwhile, the man was gazing at her in silence to know whether the Lord had made his journey successful or not. Then it came about when the camels had finished drinking that the man took a gold ring weighing a half shekel and 2 bracelets for her wrists weighing 10 shekels in gold and said, "Whose daughter are you? Please tell me, is there room for us to lodge in your father's house?" And she said to him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor." Again she said to him, "We have plenty of both straw and feed and room to lodge in." Then the man bowed low and worshipped the Lord. And he said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his loving kindness and his truth toward to my master. As for me, the Lord has guided me in the way to the house of my master's brother." So he recognizes that this is from God and that she's the right person. With such a specific prayer, I don't know how you could not see that this was from God. And it's kind of important to note that he prayed this prayer with the determination to get God's guidance in this. But this becomes an important factor for making everybody else aware that God was involved. Because you see, he's going to tell the story again to some other people. Verses 28 to 33. Then the girl ran and told her mother's household about these things. Now Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban, and Laban ran outside to the man at the spring. And it came about that when he saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrists, and when he heard the words of Rebekah his sister saying, "This is what the man said to me," he went to the man, and behold, he was standing by the camels at the spring. And he said, "Come in, blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside, since I have prepared the house and a place for the camels?" So the man entered the house. Then Laban unloaded the camels, and he gave straw and feed to the camels, and water to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him. They were well taken care of. And it appears that they were impressed by the fact that he had 10 camels and that he had approached the girl and talked with her. But he has more to say, and they need to hear it. But when food was set before him to eat, he said, "I will not eat until I have told my business." And he said, "Speak on." So he said, "I am Abraham's servant, and the Lord has greatly blessed my master so that he has become rich, and he has given him flocks and herds and silver and gold and servants and maids and camels and donkeys. Now Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master in her old age, and he has given him all that he has." Now, the next set of verses, which I'm not going to read, are really a reiteration of this story as it happened, starting back with Abraham making him promise. It is important to note that in doing this, that he is trying to make an impression on them about the success that Abraham has had, talking about his wealth, coming there with 10 camels, and then praying to God that God has been a part of this. I think the thing that convinces them is the God part. We're going to jump ahead to some next set of verses that I want to read, which is Genesis 24, 49 to 60. And I bowed low. He's told them the story about how he prayed and that God fulfilled that prayer. That's important. He's telling the family this. And it says, "And I bowed low and worshiped the Lord and blessed the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who guided me in the right way to take the daughter of my master's kinsman for a son. So now, if you're going to deal kindly and truly with my master, and tell me, and if not," I think he means if you're not going to be kind, "let me know that I may turn to the right hand or the left." Then Laban and Bethuel answered and said, "The matter comes from the Lord, so we cannot speak to you bad or good. Behold, Rebekah is before you, take her and go. Let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken." Their response was quick and immediate and directly to the point that they recognized that God was involved in this. They didn't talk about Abraham's camels. They didn't talk about Abraham's riches. They didn't even ask about what Isaac looked like. They just were ready to go because of the story of the servant telling them what he prayed and how God had answered it. And it came about when Abraham's servant heard their words that he bowed himself to the ground before the Lord. a second time that he's thanking God for directing the way, because he knew that just because he found the right girl didn't mean she was going to go or that the family was going to let her go. So he thanked God a second time. And the servant brought out articles of silver and articles of gold and garments and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave precious things to her brother and to her mother. Then he and the men who were with him ate and drank and spent the night. When they arose in the morning, they said, "Send me away to my master." He got it done. He's ready to go. But the family's not quite ready. But her brother and her mother said, "Let the girl stay with us a few days, say 10. Afterwards she may go." And he said to them, "Do not delay me, since the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away that I may go to my master." Apparently the servant was concerned that this stall might result in the ending of the situation. Plus, he'd already been out for about half a month. He would like to get back home. And also, I think he didn't want to wear on the family there. He felt that it was time to go back because he'd gotten what he wanted, and it was the right place to be. And they said, "We will call the girl and consult her wishes." Then they called Rebekah and said to her, "Will you go with this man?" And she said, "I will go." So in the end, without seeing Isaac, but knowing that he was well off and would take care of her, Rebekah decided to go. She not only was she strong and hardworking and kind, but she was brave and decisive. She was ready to go. Thus they sent away their sister Rebekah and her nurse with Abraham's servant and his men, and they blessed Rebekah and said to her, "May you, our sister, become thousands of 10,000s, and may your descendants possess the gate of those who hate them." We already know that Abraham has been promised lots of children, so she's just going to benefit from that as well. Then Rebekah arose with her maids, and they mounted the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rebekah and departed. Now Isaac had come from going to Beer-lahai-roi, for he was living in the Negev. And Isaac went out to meditate in the field toward evening, and he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, camels were coming. And Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from the camel, and she said to the servant, "Who is that man walking in the field to meet us?" And the servant said, "He is my master." Then she took her veil and covered herself, and the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his father's Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Thus Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. I don't know if you noticed in this story, but I have not said the name of the servant because it's not in here. Abraham's at the beginning of the story, and Isaac's kind of at the end, but the servant's throughout the whole story, and yet he's not even mentioned. Now, we have an idea of who he might be because there's a name given to one of Abraham's servants earlier. But the fact that he goes out and is faithful to the mission, that he is full of faith about what God would do, and that he was ready to do the job to bring back the right person, says a lot about what a good character and person for us. But he doesn't get any credit by name. And that's probably just because the person who really made this happen, the one who orchestrated all of this, is God. God made it happen. So, when you think of camels, be faithful to the mission, have faith in God who will give success, and thank God for the success. And who are the right people? They're the ones who respond to God's call. Thank you.